powered by Riverside FM.
On this episode of Coyote Time, we go searching for time-displaced simians with Sony's 1999 platformer, Ape Escape. Wyatt, so on your recommendation, I finally watched Magnolia, the Paul Thomas Anderson. I mean, I guess people do consider that his magnum opus, don't they? Which is weird to say.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It was that was his third film. Like, it was what he immediately did after Boogie Nights, right?
Yeah, I think so.
God, yeah. So Hard Eight, then Boogie Nights, then that, and then he's had a career. Even though he does the Tarantino thing of, Tarantino's kind of in a weirder one, but it's he kind of has that Gen X thing of I'm gonna be the classic movie directors where I'm only gonna make this many films and then I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to dry myself out. But then every time he says that, he's I'm back with a new film. He's got a new one coming out, not this year, I think next year, right?
Probably. I don't even know.
Because he said that The Master was his last one, and then he did Phantom Thread, and he was nope, that's my last one, I'm not doing any... he even managed to convince Daniel Day-Lewis to be I'm not doing any... Yeah, no, this is my last one as well.
Yeah.
and then he came back, and then he was actually, no, I got another... I got everybody... oh, no, not that. That was the Cameron Crowe one, never mind. He was I got another one, Licorice Pizza. This is my next one, but this is... But then he didn't say that this was his last one. He was just I just got another one. What do you think? Kind of thing. So
yeah, it looks like he's filming it now. His next one.
I was gonna say, I imagine he'd probably be shooting it in your neck of the woods because that's where he most. Well, I guess that's where a lot of his early stuff is set. Not that I'm gonna dox you or anything. But
yeah. No, Licorice Pizza too.
I can remove that from the recording if you want. Actually,
I don't care.
Okay.
LA's a big place.
That's true, yeah. I was going to say, because I could say that you live outside of where the Master is. Yeah, because the Master's set in LA as well, isn't it?
Is it? That's one of the ones I haven't seen.
Well, it's about diet. Well, it's kind of it's not really about it, but it is about Dianetics and Elron Hobbit. It's
oh yeah.
Scientology, which obviously LA is kind of what Utah is to the Mormons, I guess.
Right.
Kind of is to the Scientologists, right?
Yeah.
This is all really good conversation for, I guess, the game that we're going to... I mean, Magnolia hasn't got a massive amount to do with the game that we're talking about, other than they came out sort of around the same... Well, they came out the same year, right? Magnolia's
1999, yeah.
Yeah, so we did get two bangers land in the same year. We did. Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia and Sony Interactive Entertainment's Ape Escape. But, I don't know. Magnolia was good. I had watched Boogie Nights 2 nights before it, which was also very... I think Boogie Nights is kind of more my... That's the one I like more, just because I kind of I don't know, I just...
Fair.
70s period pieces, I guess, always have better music in them, whereas all the music in Magnolia was... It was all done by the same composer, right? It was Leslie Mann or whatever. Not Leslie Mann, she's a comedian. Amy Mann?
I don't remember.
Did all the music in Magnolia. And there's I was thinking of this as well. Have you ever seen Southland Tales?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Did you see Donnie Darko?
Yeah, I've seen Donnie Darko.
Okay. I kind of wonder whether there's just this thing that all Gen X filmmakers have where it's okay, this is going to be my big this is my big ensemble film. It's going to be, important. Everything's going to be everything's going to connect with one another.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a bit towards the end of the film where the entire cast lip sync to a song.
Yeah.
And it's it's like the old-fashioned film directors of the 30s where, they'd make musicals and people would sing. But I'm going to do an ironic thing where they're all going to lip sync to a pop song.
Yeah.
Whereas in Southland Tales, there's, Justin Timberlake's and the Things I've Done by the Killers. And then in this, it was a song that was written for the film. But
right.
It was good though. It's just nice seeing John C. Reilly act. And it's funny because, like, when he then went on to do all the Feral films, he's not, like, massively removed from, like, how he is in the Paul Thomas Anderson films. It's just they kind of, like, I don't know, like, they turn up the dial, like, about 10%, so it's just kind of a tiny bit sillier. It's mostly just that he kind of just works in any film that he's put in, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, so, Wyatt, I do want to say, I might be wrong in this, actually. So, this came out in 1999. So, you were born when this game came out, correct? No, okay.
That is correct. I was born in 2000.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. So not too far removed from Ape Escape then.
No.
I was 8 years old when this came out, and funnily enough, this is unlike the 2 other games that we've covered so far on the podcast that we're doing, which is hello, folks. Welcome to Coyote Time, the video game podcast where we talk about kind of the platform games that miss their mark, similar to Bullet Time, where that's about FPS games. This is about kind of mascot-y platformery stuff. And this is kind of an interesting one because, I mean, I guess we'll get into it when we... I got an interesting kind of talking point about this, which I've kept in my pocket. But, so just go back to when it came out. It's 1999. I guess then what I will ask you is, when did you play Ape Escape for the first time, or was it for this pod?
It was about 2 weeks ago for this podcast.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my immediate question then is that how did you find it?
I mean, I really liked it, honestly.
Oh, good. Good,
straight up. I kind of knew what I was getting into because I knew, it was the first game to use the DualShock, and so I knew a lot of it was going to be based around unusual control schemes, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because it's both a take on a platformer that I haven't really seen before or after, I'd say. And also, like, it's funny, we were talking about, like, gimmicky controls and, people doing interesting things with, like, the medium.
In Princess Peach, yeah.
Yeah, and the stuff they do here is so fun with the controller, I think. I was a big fan of it. Like, I don't know, not to dive too deep into it right away, but, it's everything is so, like, physical and tactile. Like, it's, this was, 3 years after Mario 64. So people are still figuring out, like, how 3D cameras work. And I played this on the PS4, which is just emulating the PS1. And I don't know if this is how the original game works, but you actually can move the camera via the D-pad, which is interesting. So you have left stick controlling the character, and then D-pad controlling the camera, and then right stick is just like whatever gadget you're using. I don't know if it was like that in the original game.
That is because I played it emulated on DuckStation. I mean, granted,
I see.
I don't have a PS1 anymore, but like I remember playing it back in the day. It was like that, but yeah, it is. You would use the D-pad to, you use left and right to kind of rotate it around the character, clockwise and counter, and then up and down is just to sort of pan it in and out a little bit. Yeah, no, that is
interesting.
And interestingly enough, very kind of similar to how Mario 64 worked, where you would use the C buttons, but they were a bit more like... In Ape Escape, it's kind of more granular. Like, as in, you hold the button down and it keeps rotating, whereas you have to keep clicking it in Mario 64, and it kind of rotates in sort of locked implements. Same with if you're zooming in and out. There's, like, 3 different levels of zoom, where it's, like, right behind Mario's head, sort of then set about, like, 2 meters away, like, then a meter away from him, and then, like, 2 or 3 meters back, like right up in the air, which I feel like most people probably played Mario that way, where the camera was like as pulled out as possible. But, but yeah, no, this was a little bit, this is a bit softer, but I guess, if you want, we can kind of just start with the control side of it, because, like, this is the one thing about this game, which is like, I don't know, like, even saying that it's aged it isn't quite right, because it's like...
Yeah.
It's one of those. Yeah, it just like holds up in a really interesting way, sort of in a way that when we were talking about Princess Peach, where it was, nobody really makes DS games anymore, and like the Wii U sort of touched on it a tiny bit, but like these are experiences that you just don't get anymore. And then this comes along where it is basically like, okay, so what's Super Mario 64's big innovation? Oh, there was a control stick that let you like move Mario like 360 degrees, and there was like granular levels of it as well. And this has the same thing where if you only move it a little bit, he walks, but then you push it all the way and he's running about. And then rather than, because like modern control schemes now are just, oh, well, what does the right stick do? Oh, it rotates the camera. Like, 99% of video games that you can go out and buy which have that control scheme, that use, camera movement, that is all the right stick. Like, even going all the way to, like, thinking about modern stuff, like Crash 4 hasn't got camera control, but Crash Team Rumble does, and that's what the right stick does, is, like, it rotates it about. I think the SpongeBob games work like that as well. You rotate the camera with that. Whereas with this, it was like, well, we haven't figured out what camera control is yet, but what we're carrying over from Mario 64 is left analog is for moving the character about. A D-pad or C button substitute is what rotates the camera. So we have all these, like, what do we do with the right stick? And it's exactly as you described, which is, like, I guess, like, the nearest way that I could describe this and why I think it is so fabulous is that it's kind of like Wiimote style kind of gestures, or like
absolutely,
or like flicks on the iPad, like moving stuff about on the iPad with your finger, and it's like, oh, this is just incredibly clever. Like, the first kind of the toy. Well, there's two toys that you start the game with, which is, and they both kind of work in exactly the same function, which is one is a stun baton and one is a net. And the net that you use for kind of the main point of the game, which is called Ape Escape, Apes of Escape, but we'll kind of, I guess, get into that when we get to that. But then the stun baton you use to basically, like slow him down or like, attack enemies or like break stuff. And literally with a flick of the right stick, the little character that you have on screen just matches that motion perfectly. You rotate the stick and he does like a Zelda-style spin, matching the exact speed of it. And it also does like the grab by the ghoulies thing of you can move your character independently of where they're like hitting. So you can like hit behind you while moving, which is like so clever. And it's like, like, and it's one of those things that like, oh, well, why don't other games do it? And like, I feel like somebody would make a devil's advocate argument of, like, not saying, oh, it's because camera control is more important, because you can do camera control in other ways, and if the game doesn't require like totally 3D cameras, it doesn't matter too much. But like somebody would make the argument, oh, well, that's kind of confusing. Like, why don't you just have buttons that like attack in a certain direction? But this is just so much like way more kind of improvisational, expressive in regards to, like, just being able to kind of like, not just attacking from the front, you can just kind of grab from whatever direction you want, which when you're using the net, that's like so important because you have no idea, like, the chimps can kind of go in any direction. Like, that's sort of the fun of that. But and then like, and it's funny because like I looked into the development of this game. There's not a massive amount online out there, but the game basically. So the funny thing is that, so as he says, Super Mario 64 comes out in 1996, 3 years before this, and it kind of becomes this thing that completely, like, clears the deck on platform games. Like, anything that kind of, other 3D games that kind of came out around the same time, like Crash Bandicoot, were good, but they weren't, like, the future in the way that this was. Like, people looked at it and went, like, this is where we're starting from now, and that's how you get to the point of, like, Grand Theft Auto 3 and stuff like that. And, the Mario 64 control scheme, apart from the camera, kind of becomes like the trendsetter from then on out. Like, it's almost like you have to combine that with, say, like Doom in order to get to where we are with like Halo Combat Evolved and then like Grand Theft Auto 3, where, that's every control scheme is just that now. And that's been the case for 23 years, I guess. Because, yeah, both those games came out in '01, and it's like, nothing has changed since then.
Yeah.
But what? Oh, I might have lost my train of thought. So Mario 64 comes out, and they're like, okay, we want to develop a new game. And then in '97, they're basically called into an all-hands Sony meeting, and they're like, all right, we're seeing what Nintendo's done, and the market data has come back, and we can tell that this is really important. So we've come up with our own brand new innovative Sony controller, and people are like, oh my god, what have they come up with? So the N64 controller comes out. It's this incredibly odd looking implement. It's basically, it was designed foremost to be this weird 3D controller where Miyamoto was like, oh, there should be 3 different spokes on it so you can change what buttons you're pressing at different times. It's bizarre. This is the original PlayStation controller, which for all intents and purposes is an SNES controller with handles and 2 extra buttons on the back. And that becomes oh, I know what this is. I can play Crash Bandicoot with this. I could play Super Mario World or Donkey Kong Country on the previous controller. This makes sense to me. But their big innovation is, well, Nintendo has this they've come up with this one digital analog stick, which is the future of movement in 3D. What if we have 2 of those? And so, that's just their big innovation is 2 control sticks instead of 1. And they present it to the teams in Sony, and they go, we don't know what we're going to do with these, but hey, 2 is better than 1. Go off and figure something out. And the team that was working on Ape Escape and was already pretty far along in their concept was oh, this kind of changes everything for us. We should go back to the drawing board and come up with as many different ideas as we can that will use the second control stick. Because how far did you get in the game in regards to how many of the gadgets did you unlock?
I beat the game.
Oh, you beat the okay, so you got everything. Great.
I did.
So all the toys in Ape Escape are really fun in regards to, they remind me of WarioWare touch mini games of how many things can we do with the touch screen.
Yeah,
my favorite
totally.
one is well, actually no, I'll throw it over to you because I've been non-stop talking. So
sure.
I really like Ape Escape is the problem. I've been excited to get to this.
Definitely the best game we played so far. Honestly, this might be a game I replay once a year or something.
God, I think I've replayed this game not every year, but
oh really?
Nearly, nearly since it's come out. Yeah, no.
Wow.
I do genuinely. I am very fond of Ape Escape, but
it's great. Yeah,
that's enough of me. So I'm gonna throw it to you. Out of the unlockable gadgets, which is your favorite?
First I want to say,
okay,
not a gadget, but the rowboat. I laughed out loud when I first started using it because they explain you need to use both sticks to control the oars, and so I'm okay, I had an image of how it worked in my head, and then I realized that you're supposed to rotate them in full circles as if you were actually physically, again, it's Wii inputs, you're actually physically rowing the boat, and then which direction you move them actually matters because your character just mimics what you're doing. And I just started laughing out loud because it's so tactile and ridiculous. It's so fun. I think though, the RC car I found really interesting because you control this car, and I don't know, maybe just because I was thinking of Mario Odyssey, the way you control an RC car in that game, but with one control stick, I believe is how it works. You're controlling this car, but you can also just move your character at the same time, and it's really hard to explain how strange it is.
It's funny that you mention that because literally what I was thinking, because my favorite is also the RC car, and in my mind I kind of felt of, you remember there were all those rumors about that they were trying to get Luigi was in Super Mario 64. I got the build on my desk we can do it any day. They never happened. And in your head you go, oh okay, well the way that probably worked was just player 1 is Mario, player 2 is Luigi. But in my head, I was just kind of like, I was just thinking of Sony just going, oh, if we got 2 sticks, we can literally have 2 characters that you control at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you have the kid with the so basically like the only downside is like, so because the kid is controlling the RC car, he can only move and jump, so he can't like defend himself anymore. Whereas the RC car, for all intents and purposes, until it's like attacked, is like like it can just run into stuff and like hurt like the chimps and stuff like that. And so it basically becomes that there was an Xbox Live game like a couple. Well, you know who Joseph Ferris is, the guy who made It Takes Two. His first game, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, that is the control scheme.
Oh yeah.
Each character is a stick, and so basically it's one of those like Ape Escape is one of those weird situations where it's like all of these mechanics that have come, like, you know, Brothers came out and people like celebrated it for, wow, you know, 2 characters on 2 sticks, that's so clever, no one's ever come up with this before. Like, not true. I mean, Ape Escape had this back in 99, and then like all the kind of gadgets have this sort of like the hula hoop is something that I think of where you have to like spin it up in order to like power it up to like in order to work, but while also moving your character, so it kind of becomes like a bit of like patting your head and like rubbing your belly at the same time, which is fun. Their version of the double jump, which is that, well, it has a double jump in it. So, like, the propeller is like essentially a triple jump that also raises the roof. But having that be spinning that is like really fun. And the fact that if you slow the spin, it kind of like levels out. If you stop spinning at any point, then it kind of cuts out. But you can kind of, as long as you keep spinning it, it will just keep going, which is like really interesting. Like, they do a lot with the controls, and the key thing is as well is that they also threw in like a ton of mini games, which, well, I say a ton, there's 3 mini games in there that basically were like, well, what were the other things that you could potentially do with a stick? Here they are. Like, there's one of them is literally a top-down shooter, which is it was the simplest idea you could possibly come up with like this control scheme, and hey, it's in there as a mini game. One is a boxing mini game where each fist is controlled by the sticks, which is really cute. And skiing, which is kind of similar, like the way that you push yourself forward and you steer is with the sticks. And yeah, just the amount of like potential that they squeeze out of like all of those things is just so like, it's really impressive considering this was the first game to do. But then I wonder whether it was the thing of, it was the WarioWare thing of, oh, new piece of hardware, like how many different weird things can we do on this? And the fact that they all just work super well, and they're all like, apart from like the mini games, which you go out of the main levels to use those, everything's just super cohesive, like in a way that, like, Super Mario 64 didn't even feel like that solid on release versus this, where it was like, oh, this feels like this is like the second game in the series where they...
I was gonna say, it feels like the sequel to itself with how many ideas it has,
Yeah, and the fact that they made it in like 2.5 years is like astonishing to But, I mean, obviously, considering like development times at that point, like, you know, a lot of games were still being turned around in like 18 months or 12 months.
Yeah.
It's still really impressive, like all the stuff.
I mean, this game feels like it must have cost a lot of money, like when it came out. It does seem like a pretty massive game.
Oh gosh, yeah, and it was made internally by Sony as well. And so I was debating whether to shift gears to maybe talking about that a little bit before we get back to kind of what Ape Escape is about, which is, so we kind of talked about this in the Crash episode, which was the ongoing thing with the Sony PlayStation of, well, Nintendo has Mario, Sega has Sonic, but who is the PlayStation mascot for all intents and purposes? Yeah. And the fact that everybody kind of had their own attempt at doing it. Like, the earliest one, I guess, was Gex the Gecko, like, right when the console came out by Crystal Dynamics. But then eventually you got like Bubsy 3D, and then you got Crash, and then you got Spyro, and then, but these were all made by separate developers. Whereas with this was like, the first, like, apart from stuff like Blasto and like Jersey Devil, which weren't really properly, like, you know, they never really caught on in the way that this did. Like, this is like Sony's first proper attempt at it. And the thing that I find so interesting about it is that it kind of flips the point of a mascot platformer in that the main character that you have, you know, Crash Bandicoot is the main character, or Spyro is the main character. The mascot of this isn't Spike, though, the guy that you play. The mascot of this are basically the enemies of the game, which are the apes. Which I just find that so, like, interesting. And I also kind of wonder whether that might be a thing of... Because Sony kind of has this recurring as an issue sort of going on from here, but I don't know. So I guess asking you, like, you didn't... I guess because of, like, when you got into games, the apes weren't really a thing at that point, were they?
No. Like, I kind of knew what Ape Escape was because of, what's it called? PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale or whatever.
Like, I didn't even know the apes were in that.
I think they are. I don't know if they're a character, but they're like in it in some capacity. You know, maybe it's like an item or something. But yeah,
or like
that was
one of the
my
levels
familiarity.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
So I guess it's really weird that then, like, in regards to like PlayStation mascots with All Star Battle Royale, like Ratchet and Clank are in it, and I think Jak and Daxter in it as well. But it's like Nathan Drake and one of the fascists from Killzone and like Sackboy again. Like at that point, Sony didn't have like a face of the console, did they? I mean, I guess the nearest might have been Nathan Drake, but that is just a human face, which is so weird to consider. But like, with the apes, it was funny because like basically they lived and died from. Well, this came out in '99, so 2 years before the PS2 eventually came out. And then there were two more games on the PS2 in the main franchise, and then there were a couple of spin-offs. But basically, the Ape Escape series just kind of ends around the time of, like, Snake Eater, like, and all that sort of, all the extra stuff in that. And then when the PS3 comes out, that's kind of it. Like, they're not really kept around anymore. And I wonder whether it was a thing of, like, I mean, Sony's such a weird developer when it comes to... Well, a weird publisher when it came to this sort of stuff as well, which was... You saw the beginnings of it in the PS2 era of, like... Oh, we should... You know, games should be taken a little bit more seriously. So how are we going to get the sort of respect that we deserve? Why don't we make our games more like film and television? Okay, what's popular on television? Prestige. Okay, what are the biggest prestige TV shows at the moment? The Wire and The Sopranos. Okay, we need to make our games grim and grittier then, which is how you end up with Jak and Daxter, which started off as Naughty Dog wanting to make a Banjo-Kazooie style game because after making a bunch of linear Donkey Kong Country style games, and then in the second one it becomes GTA. It becomes like an open world like crime sandbox where it's like dark colors and a serious plot line. It's like, okay. Like, rather than making games they were making games that were like a better fit for that kind of audience. Like, you got stuff like The Getaway and like Siren. I think Siren's probably the best example of that because that was them like channeling the look of particular films, in this case like sort of Japanese haunted house horror stuff, but like making it work in games. But then a lot of other developers was just kind of like, oh, why don't we just take the thing that we already made but make it grim? And like maybe the most embarrassing example of that being like Shadow the Hedgehog. Of what if Sonic had a gun and he swore and he was like, have you played the Shadow the Hedgehog game?
No, I haven't.
Okay, we might have to put that on the docket for Bullet Time because that is like such a weird cross section of, hey, look at this time of like, hey, you know, Sonic can be a we can have a complicated mascot character like Tony Soprano or Walter White. It's just that he uses a gun and he collects the Chaos Emeralds. So bizarre. But then, and then to finish my point, and then the PS3 era comes along and it's like, oh hey, we can do photorealism sort of. No more platformers. We only want Hollywood style cinematic games. And so you end up with Uncharted, and like then The Last of Us, which is sort of boom. That's the stamp of okay, our experiments finally worked. This is the only game we're gonna make from now on.
Yeah.
Insomniac went from Ratchet and Clank to making Resistance Fall of Man, which we'll probably do on Bullet Time at some point, which was their like take on like the World War One, but yeah, on like the military shooter, but had like a weird science fiction bent. And then everybody else just went into making realistic stuff, and yeah, the apes didn't fit into that plan, which is
very
when
sad.
you then get back to they have a mascot for a little bit in Sackboy. Oh, well, what's Sackboy's deal? Oh, you can dress them up as other video game characters or like different time periods and stuff. Oh, kind of like you had the apes doing right at the end of like the life cycle of them. It's, I don't know, weird that just they kind of ended up going through the same motion, and now we're kind of in the same thing again of that PS5 and the game that's on the PS5, Astro's Playroom. Where they're these little robot guys that look like basically Metal Sackboy, but they're doing the same thing of, oh, they dressed up like other video game characters. And it's like, rather than just keeping a mascot that can just do this for years and years, they just keep repeating the same thing over and over again, which I find just so bizarre. And to go back to Astro's Playroom, that game was a big old demo for all the things the PS5 controller could do with its like triggers that were stiff, like, and stuff like that, and like using the touchpad. And then boom, literally back 1999, they were doing all of that in Ape Escape, which I don't know, it's sort of throw a question to you, like, do you think they could like make a game like this again today? As in, go ahead.
I mean, I want to think so.
Yeah.
There's so many aspects of this game that I think don't make sense in the modern market, unfortunately. Yeah. But on the other hand, like, again, you see something like, you know, Mario still makes a lot of money. And I mean, it's a question of like, who would develop it? Because, like, I can see an indie dev, like, you know, taking some of these ideas and going ham with them. And whether that's, like, the controller gimmicks or just, like, the basic concept, you know, like, make this, like, a $20, $30 game. But, like, I don't know, you know, Japan Studio doesn't exist anymore, sadly. And, like, everyone's still kind of going in on live services and, like, Sony's doing their single-player games. And so, I don't know, I want to say in, like, 5 years I could see this game existing, but it doesn't seem like anyone has any interest in it, like, in developing it at least. But, like, I feel like it would do decent if someone actually made it. I'd like to think so. Oh, yeah. I don't know.
I think the big thing that would stop it from being made is probably the control scheme side of it in regards to... And I was thinking because like I of the time of recording this recording this podcast, I made a video about a fucking live service game that kind of just made me feel miserable. But most of that was just because of the fact of, this is just every kind of game is like this now in regards to what's the term called, like carcinization or whatever, where it's like in nature eventually everything becomes a crab, like it's just an evolutionary dead end. For like, and it kind of feels like that in games in some ways where, but I think maybe this is just because I think about when we started doing Bullet Time and like there was a popular game type, I think it might have been Fortnite, where we were just saying, oh well, every game's eventually just going to become Fortnite, but that didn't really happen. But now it's like, oh, every game is just going to become like Suicide Squad, which isn't Fortnite because it's a loot. Well, Fortnite has got looter elements in it because it's it's a survival game, but like not quite to the rhythm of this sort of thing. And so it just becomes, oh well, whatever's popular is that's what everybody's going to make. And I'm sure that back in the 2000s, everyone was like, oh, everything's going to become GTA, or like, oh, everything's going to become Uncharted or stuff like that. Yeah, which I think is interesting, but like. I also played a bunch of indie games from Steam Next Fest, and there was a lot of variety in there, but I was also thinking about, like, all the indie 3D platforms that I've recently played, where mostly the big selling point of them, and I know the reason that it is, because it's called a selling point for a reason, because you want people to play your game. And what the easiest way to do that is by going, oh, it's like 3D Sonic the Hedgehog, but good. Like, that's kind of like Spark the Electric Jester was sort of like, that has its own like flair and flavor, but it is very much like the 3D ones are like, oh, these are like Sonic Adventure, but good. Or like Rolling Rascal is like, oh, these are like really good Sonic style games. And then like Hat in Time was kind of like a throwback to sort of stuff like Mario Sunshine or whatever, which people hadn't got in a while.
Yeah.
And I think we would have a very difficult time in being like, hey, ours is a throwback to like Ape Escape, and people would go, oh, it's a game where you go chasing monkeys, yeah? And you're like, sort of, but also we've also treated this game like we've never seen a traditional controller before, so we're going to have it do things that are different. I think that would put a ton of people off, and like to the extent of like, because during the Wii U and the Wii era, like Mario, like the Super Mario games didn't have any camera control in them, but then they eventually added it back in Odyssey, and their reasoning was, well, people were asking for it, and people are used to it now because of Minecraft, so like, why wouldn't we do this? And so, outside of like in-game gimmicks, like, you know, using your hat to like control stuff or going into like 2D sections and whatever, like controls are just very much standardized now to an extent of like, could you even get away with doing something like this unless it was on the iPad? And in that respect, you would have to like really, I don't know, like tunes. The perfect Ape Escape game would have been one that came out on the Wii, which would have never happened because of Sony and Nintendo. But like, you know, you use the nunchuck to move the character around and, you know, center the camera or whatever. But then the Wiimote just turns into a million different things. Like you swing it like a sword, or you like shoot it like a gun, or the Zelda games a bit. Skyward Sword's kind of a little bit like that, but just not quite as smooth as using a stick, funnily enough, which when they did the port to the Switch, like, yeah, funnily enough, that's like the best way of playing that game. It's just using the right stick to do Ape Escape style inputs in a Zelda game. It's just the way that game is paced is not quite right. Versus this game, which is paced like absolutely wonderfully. But I guess before we get into sort of what you do in Ape Escape a little bit, I mean, I don't know, what are your sort of thoughts on like just the apes as like as being potentially Sony mascots, but also just like their viability of ever coming back, I suppose.
They have such a simple design, but it's like, you know, again, I played this game for the first time this year, and it's just like immediately so obviously iconic. And it is funny because Spike is just kind of this, you know, generic spiky hair, kind of almost anime protagonist like looking character.
Yeah.
You know, as you're saying, like the apes are the highlight, and they do have that like malleability where they're really simple. They got these big mouths and expressive eyes, and then they're like their little their mind control helmets.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, and just like you can throw on, like you can imagine like a bunch of different costumes, a la Sackboy. So they're really simple, really malleable, but just like, I don't know, the sound effects, like the way they run around is so instantly charming and like expressive. It's way more than just like a Goomba or like, you know, a Koopa in any other game. They do feel like the main characters. I love them. I adore them. Yeah.
It's funny that you say about the costume thing, because that is literally in the third game. That is the big, like, well, not the selling point.
Oh, interesting.
Like, so it's funny, like how it's not quite diminishing returns, but so the first game is like the most ambitious story-wise in regards to like, what's the concept? Apes through time. The apes have traveled to different points in history, and it's like, oh, they're in the prehistoric age and they're like riding T-Rexes, or like, oh, they're in a Japanese castle and they're like, you know, activating traps and stuff. Like, they get like they do like a lot of fun in regards to just, like just sending a bunch of like goofy, silly apes like back to time periods. Then in the second one, it's, okay, what's the concept? apes around the world. Okay, fair enough. So I guess you like here's some apes in like a villa, and then there's like apes having like a beach holiday and stuff, which you kind of already did in the time travel one, but all right, fair enough. The third one, though, is basically the villain of the first, well, he's the villain of all the games, Spectre, starts a TV station, which basically like in mind controls the people of Earth and puts them in like a vegetative state, basically. Not quite as serious as that. Basically, everyone's just glued to their televisions and watching all the monkey programming. And so you play as two new characters who go to like the TV station to stop it. And so all of the different levels are like pastiches, basically, where you have some which are like, oh, these are set in different time periods. So boom, there's your Ape Escape 1 stuff. Oh, they're set in different parts of the world. Boom, there's your Ape Escape 2 stuff. And then you can also have a ton of parodies. And you have like just monkey, like the first level is it's like a kid's like kind of fairy tale corner show where you have an ape dressed up as Red Riding Hood and another one in a wolf costume, and they're like chasing each other about. And then you go to one where it's like a ninja castle again, but they're all dressed up like ninjas and samurai. They just do like a lot in regards to just making that game super charming and like just dressing up all the apes. Yeah. And the key thing with that as well is that like that's actually I might save that because I don't know, we could do the other Ape Escapes at another point, I suppose. But
that's true.
But yeah, I was just saying, like, so yeah, just like instantly iconic design of them. And that was the funny thing, was that when they started working on the project, they kind of had like an entire, like, the sort of the nut of the idea was, oh, we want a game where you chase around like apes. So we want to have like a design which makes them like not too realistic or too serious because that might scare kids off, but you also want them to be like super reactive so you can kind of like get ideas. And so like somebody drew like a napkin picture of like this cartoon ape where the eyes are like bulging out like old fashioned like tube lights, and they're like, boom, that's it.
Yeah.
Got it. Then they figured out, oh hey, why don't we put sirens on their heads? Because it's such a cool little idea where it's like, okay, like, how can you tell, like, what the alert status is of an ape? Because, like, you know, the animation's only going to be simple enough that they can, like, move about or whatever. Oh, put a police siren on their head. When they think, hey, somebody's sneaking up on me, it turns yellow and starts flashing. Boom, when they've seen you, it turns red. I always wondered with this, because you know that with Ape Escape there was all the weird... So in Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, there's the crossover with Ape Escape.
Right.
I always wondered whether, like... Because people are always like, well, why did they do that? Oh, it's because it was like a Sony franchise, blah, blah, blah. I wondered whether Hideo Kojima, who was working on Metal Gear Solid, which had came out maybe the same... It was either the same year or the year before.
Yeah.
Saw the game and he was like, oh... This is like a kid-friendly version of what I was trying to do in Metal Gear. Of like, how do you know if, if guards are looking in your direction? Well, either you have to go into first person and they look at you, or you see little exclamation marks above the head, and you can see sort of like their sight cones on the Soliton radar. But no, this game completely just gets around that by just literally putting big lights on top of their heads.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
I always think of as well, there's a video essayist called Matthew Matosis who did like a bunch of really short like essays about games, and one thing that he always said about Ape Escape, which has like stuck with me forever, which is like, again, I always think of this game as being like it kind of spiritually it's a sequel to Super Mario 64, but like in a weird direction. And one of the ways that it kind of achieves that, which is what he pointed out, which is, so in Mario 64, like, you go and you do all these things to unlock stars, but stars don't do anything. They just bounce up and down. Like, you might fight a boss and then boom, there's just a star waiting behind. This game basically makes the stars, like, they're AI. So it's like, there's an extra... Even when you get all the way to the top of the mountain to get your star, there's then the challenge of having to chase them around to, like, actually capture them. Which is, like...
Yeah.
Again, it's silly, but it has like so much kind of like, and again, because they're not scripted at all, they're all completely like AI driven. It's just so dynamic and like, I don't know. Like, even if you remade this game and you couldn't quite get the Jester stuff in there, that's like one element of this game that I could see an indie going, okay, yeah, no, we're gonna make a new game where it's like you go around chasing, like you have to capture stars. You know what it is? I've literally just made this connection as well. Super Mario 64, where there's those 2 stars where you have to capture the rabbit in the basement. It was literally like they said, what if the entire game was that? And it's so weird to think that it's like, I don't know whether, with like the development of Super Mario 64 before they built like any of the levels and stuff, it was basically like for a year, Miyamoto had like this white kind of like staging area, and it was just Mario chasing around a rabbit, and he just kept tuning the controls of like Mario, and he kept tuning the speed of the rabbit until it felt like absolutely right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it just feels like Sony like heard about that prototype and said, oh, that's the entire game as you chase around. It's not a rabbit, it's a chimp, but like that's all it's going to be this kind of adventure game where every star, every objective is a rabbit that you have to grab. And then before you even do that, you have to figure out how to get to them, how to like activate the room that they're in and stuff like that. I think that's probably why I'm like so over the moon with this game, because it is like, just from a game design perspective, is like, oh, this is like such a clever evolution on like all these things that kind of came beforehand. And why I miss that, like,
absolutely.
Super Mario 64 then became Sunshine and then Galaxy and whatever. Mario still exists. Ape Escape, like, for all intents and purposes, no one's made a new Ape Escape yet, and it's like, but you don't have to do much. Like, what is there works really well. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, I went off on one about Ape Escape again. That seems to be the common theme of this episode. I guess then, I don't know. How did you find chasing after the apes? I guess.
I think we should go into like how the actual game works at this point. Like, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
but each. And this very much seems like Sony's design of the time, especially Japan's studio, because I kept thinking of like Shadow of the Colossus and things like that, and Mario 64, where it's like each encounter feels so, despite the fact that it's like these little AI creatures, like everything feels so handcrafted.
Yes,
and it is. But I mean, it's like Mario 64, where you go into a level and you have all of these stars, these objectives to get, except this is the more modern approach where you go in the level and you get everything at once. Mm-hmm. At least, well, you will replay levels. Yeah.
Like they give you basically they kind of split the difference nicely between Mario 64 and Banjo, where in Banjo it's like you could collect everything at once if you have the right abilities. Mario 64 was you get booted out of the level every time. This is a bit more kind of like, it's handcrafted in a weird way of like, well, there's technically 9 monkeys in this level, but right now we only want you to grab 5. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm fine with that. It gives you enough flexibility of how you want to approach certain monkeys. And then certain ones you can't grab until you have certain abilities. So, boom, that's fine. I'm happy to come back to these levels at another time when I can overpower them with all the stuff that I get. But that works really well. But, sorry, go on.
Yeah. But, like, each scenario, like, there are, like, bosses towards the end of the game, but each scenario feels like, it feels so gargantuan, like a boss or like a mini boss or something. Each, like, because it's not just the first level, the monkeys are just running around and you just have to capture them all, and it's very simple. It's just like, get these objectives. And then as it goes on, it's like, this monkey's hiding in a tree, this monkey's underneath an egg, and you have to break open the eggs, and then it runs around and hides under other things. And it's so dynamic, the way everything like works with the environment. It feels so ahead of its time, honestly. Like, it's so impressive the way there's just like a dozen bespoke elements in each levels, and very little is like reused between levels. It feels like it's crazy.
The shocking thing to me is that, and again, like, to go back to, okay, like, Sony's making their own kind of platformer and whatever, and then Super Mario 64 comes out and changes everything. Fair enough. So Crash Bandicoot, it can't change what it is. It's linear at this point. But then Insomniac eventually goes, oh, we can do like 3D sandboxy levels on the PlayStation. That's not impossible. And they make like Spyro. And then this is Sony going, okay, so how do we do Mario 64 style gameplay but on the PlayStation? And the way that they kind of achieve that is the levels aren't quite as big as Mario 64, but they are very dense, like in regards to there's lots of different rooms that you can go into, there's lots of like different layers to them, but they are like, for all intents and purposes, sandboxes. And like the best sandbox games, like there is the want to explore them, either to find chimps or just to see like all the weird places that you can go. But the thing that takes it like the extra step for me, like, because Mario 64 is like fine, but the thing that's like aged it the most is that everything is very abstract in regards to, oh, it's Bob on Battlefield, but it's just like a big hill surrounded by like dirt quarries. Oh, here's Thwomp's Tower. It is literally a floating tower, and it's like it's all very like imagery that has now become sort of like vaporwave. But the game, basically. But this, and then Banjo comes out and it's a bit like, oh no, these are like kind of thought out places. Like this is a desert, it's got like the pyramids of Giza and stuff in it, blah, blah, blah. But then this goes an even better step of like, oh no, these are like real places in history for the most part, but they've been like the chimps kind of got here before you did. And like, they don't quite go the thing of, changing Mount Rushmore so it's all pictures of or whatever. But it is very much like, oh, like all of these places are turned into monkey traps. And like my favorite level in this game, thinking about it, apart from maybe the theme park towards the end, is when you go to the Japanese castle, and the moment that you go in, there are 3 chimps which are like in white shorts. That's the thing is, we'll go into the colors in a sec, but like, there's 3 chimps in white shorts. The trick is like, oh, I need to sneak in and not activate them. Because they're wearing white, now they see you immediately, boom. They run off into 3 different rooms. And it's like, oh, shit. Yeah. So it becomes like, it's not quite a haunted house, but it has that kind of haunted house feeling of, oh, now my objectives have been split up and I need to go and like grab them one by one. Some levels as well have like locks to them where you have to capture a certain number of apes to like open the way ahead, which is really interesting. So like, as you said, it's got this really nice, even in doing a sandbox game, that's this really nice handcrafted feel of like every objective feels like a mini narrative or like, kind of a mini activity that they've really figured out super well. So levels wise, how would you rank them? What are your tops and bottoms, I guess?
I really like, oh man, I don't remember the names of them, but I really like it's probably like the second world or something, the like jungle section.
Oh yes.
Like there's this great, and the game does stuff like this a few times, but it really plays excuse me, it plays around structurally, where like there will be, like you said, it is a sandbox and you're going around, and occasionally you'll be guided down like a linear path, like you're just collecting apes around the level, and then you'll be thrown into this gauntlet. Like there's this level where you take an elevator down and you're just chasing this ape through like an obstacle course, and this happens a few times, and I love that, where it kind of takes a detour to like really hone in on like this one. It's like, it's just a regular ape, it's nothing special, but all of a sudden for like 5 minutes you're chasing down this one monkey.
No.
And it's great, the like all the diversions it goes on. Like I don't know, it really adds a lot to the pacing and like the structure of the game, I'd say.
Yeah, it's funny, like, those early levels, I think, are kind of, I wonder whether it was the Mario 64 thing of, they kind of came up with those last sort of development-wise, because they were the ones that were a bit more, sort of, not beginner-friendly, but they were the ones that kind of, like, eased you in with a lot of stuff. But yeah, that ape that runs around the obstacle course, that was, like, one of the last ones I captured in the entire game, because it was so annoying to, like, I had to do that obstacle course like so many times to kind of master it in regards to like getting to them. And it's one of those things as well where they sort of encourage you, hey, come back here when you have like a few more abilities because this is going to make it easier. But even with like all the endgame stuff, it is such a big ass pain.
Oh yeah, I had to use save states. Like that one was annoying.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so with the chimps as well. Like I mentioned that they have lights above their heads to show how alert they are. But a cute thing is that they also have different colored shorts, and they basically like give you like the way that like in a Metal Gear game you would have to look at a guard and see like, oh, he has these weapons, or he has like like in MGS5 you would zoom in and you would see like, oh, they have night vision goggles, or they're wearing helmets, so I can't use like headshots on them. This is like a kiddier and simpler version of that. Of yellow shorts are the most common ones, and that just means they have like average temperament. They will fight back and stuff like that. Then the quote-unquote weaker ones wear like light blue shorts, and those are like your easy gets because they don't really fight back. And then as the game goes on, like they get different colors and kind of more challenging colors. Red basically means they're aggressive, so like they will see you quicker and they will hit harder. Black shorts have fucking... This game's really funny because it's a game for kids, but there are just like apes that are packing like actual Uzis that will just shoot at you, and that's the ones with they wear black shorts and black shades, and they just shoot Uzis.
Yeah.
Then you have like ones with white shorts, which are more like they're keener. They can see you from a further distance. The ones with the dark blue ones, they run faster. And what's really cute as well is that like one of the items that you get is a monkey radar, which really good idea for a 3D platformer at this stage, where it's like, oh, you don't know where your objectives are. Boom. Here's a thing that you can use in world that will like point you in the right direction. It's another fun gestural gimmick of you literally rotated around like a radar, and it will ping in the direction that chimps are. But then you can press the first person like camera button, and it will just give you information on the chimps. Like it will show you where they are in the level, what their names are, what their stats are. Like it will show you, oh, this is they're not very strong, or they're very fast, and they're they have a nice temperament. And then it gives you a name and a description for every monkey in the game.
I didn't realize it gave you their names. I totally forgot about that. Because I remember watching footage of the second game, and like all the monkeys are named when you capture them.
Yes,
but I forgot. Yeah.
No, so in the first game, they're all
in this game.
Yeah, in the game they're all named, and it's funny because when you go back to the sort of hub, like kind of staging area, when you save your game, one of the options on that menu is also like the Monkeypedia,
right?
You just go through and read all their names.
I totally forgot to do that because I saw that at the beginning of the game. I should have gone back to that. That's a cute idea.
Yeah, it's really cute, and again, like it's one of those like abilities in the game which I would imagine that the majority of people, and like whenever I replay this, I very rarely use the monkey radar, but like it's there for people who need it, and the fact that they went to like this level of effort with it is like just really nice. Like,
oh yeah.
It's something that like most developers wouldn't do, but the fact that it's in here, it's great. But like, yeah, it's just so the game's like a bunch. I want to say it's like 25 levels in all, which is pretty good for a game on a disc, I would say. Like,
it's pretty long.
All have really nice variety. Like, you have maybe a couple of levels sort of in the Primordial Age, then you get like a few in the Ice Age, then the Feudal Age, then the Modern Age, and then sort of like kind of spacey, futury sort of stuff, which is cool. And then the Modern Age stuff is fun. I forgot to mention when we were talking about like things that you can do with like the right stick. I like the fact that there is the tank section, which literally is just tank control. Like, it's stupid, but it is just literally tank control.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
God. But yeah, like there's a bunch of like it just has a nice variety to stuff. The cool thing as well is like in between like chunks of levels as well, you have like rival races, which are basically like, hey, how well do you know the controls of this game? Put them to the test in these little like and like you don't have to beat them to continue. You just you can beat them to get like tokens, which is what you unlock the mini games with. But like just quite a nice way of like reusing mechanics of like, oh, here is literally your like Virgil or your Shadow in regards to he has exactly the same things that you have. Like, can you beat him, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm just like constantly impressed by like like just this game that like, yeah, I know it was made by Sony's own internal team, and like a lot of the people, like I want to say it was like I can't remember his name, but he was the head of like the Japan side of Sony for years and years, and like during E3 conferences he would always, it's not Ken Kutaragi who was the guy who founded Sony, but then he became like the like CEO of the games division of like Sony. He was basically their like Satoru Iwasa, for like lack of a better term. But like,
right,
Shuei Yoshida, I think. Yeah, this was like one of his first like big projects within Sony, and like they just knocked it out of the park like on the first go, and it's so like, it is like really impressive just like what they managed to do in this, in a game that like, and I know it's like old hat to say, oh yeah, this game still holds up. The fact that its mechanics are so unique, but not to the extent of like they've aged, like it still feels really fresh, like in the way that Nintendo go, oh, if a game's good enough you can keep re-releasing it. Ape Escape is one of those things that you could just keep re-releasing and it would still work. Like,
absolutely, yeah. Just because I mean, there's nothing else like it. Because again, it's like, yeah, controls have been so standardized, but even back in 1999, no one was doing weird shit like that with the controllers.
And it's shocking that like this was the game that they kind of made to demonstrate the DualShock, but then didn't really like, nobody really took any lessons from it. But it didn't matter because then the DualShock became the controller that was still playing today. Like, yeah, sure, the sticks have moved about on certain ones, and you know, some have touchpads and some have gyro. Literally every button that is on the original every stick, every button, every input that's on the original DualShock is still on every single controller that exists today. So you could re-release Ape Escape, no problem. And people would be like, oh, okay, it's a bit odd, but like, I get this, you know, this, I don't need to have a different, like, in a way that DS games, you couldn't re-release them today unless you heavily remade them or whatever. And like, Wii U stuff. No, this gets that same kind of like, this feels like a game that Nintendo should have made in regards to like gestural gimmickry and like, you know, taking a platformer and then going an extra step with it. But like, it was made by their like main competitors, and it's so shocking to think of like, and again, not to like rag on them, but even though we kind of talk about live service stuff, but like, what are the four big like Sony franchises today? It's The Last of Us, it's Spider-Man 2, well yeah, it's the Spider-Man games.
Spider-Man,
It's God of War, which is very different to the God of War games that they used to make, and Horizon, which is another third-person action game. It is all very much just the same flavors of, you know, it's all the same flavors of ice cream, but it just has kind of different toppings on it. This is, and not to be like one of those kind of sort of nostalgia people of, oh, it was better like back in these days because they made like a bunch of other stuff. Partially just because it was cheaper to do, but like, this genuinely feels like it came out of a studio that had something to prove with a new bit of hardware and just really wanted to show off all the weird things they can do in a way that like no new PS5 games apart from Astro's Playroom really does. And I don't know, it just makes you wishful, like even with like independent developers, just like I want just somebody to come along and just shit, even if it doesn't work, just do something weird and just see like what happens, I guess. But
it's not it is, you know, it is a bummer, like just this current age of games is very iterative, and I think the thing is, a lot of it is like, of course the industry is very different. I think the big thing is just games take so long to make, and like something like Suicide Squad, you know, like there's a lot of places where like you kind of see what they were going for, but there's other ways where it's like, okay, these trends have not been popular for years, but this game has been in development for like 9 years, and it's like games just take so long that it takes a long time for trends to kind of catch up sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, as you said as well, there's kind of the fear in a lot of developers, especially of stuff like this, where it's, oh, this was in development for or we know this is going to be in development for so long. We want like the maximum amount of people to play this. And again, this I don't want to make it sound like I'm shifting the blame now to like, oh, well, consumers don't, they only want like the simplest games. If you make a very good game, like people will play it. Like Lethal Company breaks a ton of rules of like modern games. Doesn't matter though, because it works like incredibly well. Vampire Survivors is a game where literally all you can do is move, and it was like a colossal success in spite of that.
Yeah.
You can like break the rules for stuff, but as long as it's like, I mean, I know it's stupid to say, well, as long as it's good, that's fine, because there's obviously more to it, but like Ape Escape is such a confident package in that it never breaks away from that core concept of just all your moves are mapped to a right stick. Like it is like, it's puppetry, but like in a way that isn't overly fiddly like it was with the Kinect or like even with like later Wii stuff. It's like, no, this is just, you move the stick, it moves an arm. You rotate the stick, it spins a hula hoop. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Like, so well figured out. And I guess just to kind of like put the cherry on it in regards to, okay, well, we've talked about like how you play the game, like with a controller, how you play the game, like what do? You have to kidnap monkeys. Like I think this game looks really nice. Graphically, I think like for a PS1 game, holds up super well in that way that like, well, what was the PS1 good at? Really good mixing of like kind of texture, like sort of detailed enough textures on like basic enough 3D models. Boom. This just gets it super nicely. All the monkeys are like super readable, which is what you want. The plot of it is fine for what you need. I know that this game has like different voice acting in different parts of the world. I think I played the US version of my latest one. But yeah, it had in the UU it had like a quote unquote British dub, which I've never seen in any other game like since. But
yeah, I think it was more common like around the early 2000s, late 90s.
Sure.
But like, yeah, the voice acting's very funny, very campy.
The girl who's like the computer girl is, her characterization is so odd because so you have Spike, who's like your main character, who doesn't say a ton, but he's like, usual, I'm gonna stop you kind of stuff. Then you have the professor, who's like your Dr. Light, who's like, oh, I've made you all these gadgets. Oh, I can't believe the monkeys got out. Go stop them.
Yeah.
But then you have like the girl at the computer, who's voiced by Misty from the Pokemon cartoon.
Right.
And she's just like, I don't know, she's just really harsh on you when you go and rescue him from the feedback. She's like, what took you so long? And it's like, wow, okay, what the fuck? And then you have your rival who doesn't say a ton, and then you have Spectre, who's the world's biggest ham, which I absolutely adore.
So good.
He sounds
he rocks.
He sounds like he's not quite an anime voice actor. He kind of just sounds like whoever they could find to do the job. His delivery is bizarre in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. He doesn't sound like a monkey, and it's awesome. It's so goofy.
No, and it feels like... oh, no, go ahead.
No, I wasn't saying much. I was just...
No, I was thinking, because like the way that he's designed, it's almost like they wanted to go for like a bit of a Sephiroth. But they just
he's got the hair over his eyes.
Yeah, they just hired a nerd. He's like, oh, this is gonna be my kingdom, and you won't be able to stop me. And it's like, God, it's something that weirdly they don't fix too much in the later games. He still kind of sounds like that. They were just
interesting.
Like, this is a winning formula. Let's stay with this guy. But
interesting.
Voice side, not so good. The music in this game, fucking incredible.
Oh my god, yeah.
I could talk for hours about the music in this game. I've literally friend of the channels, I guess, Mitch from Heavy Eyes. I don't know when this video is coming out, but I guess I'll say now. I wrote a little bit about because his video is about like kind of jungle music during the PlayStation era.
Oh,
I
cool.
wrote a segment about the making of and sort of the mechanics of the fucking jungle soundtrack in this game. It is so good. God, I don't even know where to start with this, so I guess I'm going to throw it to you. Talk about the music. Why is the music good in Ape Escape?
I woke up with like the main theme in my head. And that's about all I have to say about it. I knew about this music like well before I played the game. Like I honestly did not know how this game actually worked, but I probably knew like half the soundtrack. It's honestly it's probably the thing about the game that has aged the best. It just sounds incredible. Like it's completely timeless. It's incredible.
It's really and again, not to keep going back to my weird general thesis of they looked at Super Mario 64 and said, okay, where can we improve? What can we do? Blah, blah, blah. But that game literally starts with a jungle rendition of the Super Mario Brothers like overworld theme. And then they never do jungle music throughout the rest of the game. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, this is like, such a like an enormous statement to make like at the beginning of that game. And again, so somebody at Sony was just like, no. We got to do like the entire thing like this. But we have to get like a guy to do it. So the guy who composed the soundtrack isn't a Sony guy. He's a DJ called Sorishi Terada.
Oh, interesting.
Literally, so, and I'll try and speedrun this because again, I'm gonna end up repeating myself from like other places. But so like jungle music becomes like, so basically you get like, so disco dies in the 1970s, and people are like, shit, we need to keep people in clubs. What do we do? So they get more into experimentation and using like early sort of synths and drum machines, and you get house music. They're like, we're gonna just isolate like the best breaks and the best vocals and stuff, and we're just gonna make new tracks which are just totally focused on keeping people on the chance floor kind of thing. House comes over to the UK mostly through black artists, and like in the UK we just have this massive Caribbean like dancehall scene. And so all those DJs were like, well, we love the sound of house, but we got to make it more of our own thing. So like they double the tempo of it. They put like a lot of they make the dub like way heavier on it. And then as a result, you get jungle music, which like in the early 90s was like, not that I was particularly alive or like old enough to go to any of these things as I was a tiny child, but like you could go to like raves across the country and like we're just playing jungle until like 6 a.m, basically.
Right.
But the thing with jungle was that like very quickly it became one of those things of like, oh, people are just making this on you're making this on your computer. Like you're using like early Cubase and stuff that like the Prodigy was using to make their out, and like Aphex Twin. But it became one of those things that because jungle was so sort of sample based and electronic, you could make it anywhere. And like everyone got inspired to do their own version of jungle, which ended up in the hands of this guy called Sorishi Terada in Japan, who's like, I want to do my own version of this where I use a lot more like sort of Japanese samples and stuff like that. And so in 96, the year that Mario 64 comes out, which again, I wonder whether they may have been inspired by that as well, he puts out this LP called Sumo Jungle, which becomes like this, like, because like you don't really get huge hits in like the genre of jungle, like in the way that you do with like, rock or like hip hop and stuff. But like this burnt up, like everybody was, Mixmag and stuff were writing about it, to the extent that somebody in Sony heard Sumo Jungle and basically said, "Oh, this is the sound of Ape Escape. Get the guy in." And they got him to compose the entire soundtrack for the game. And I wonder as well, I feel like he might have been pretty involved in the development team, because I don't know whether you noticed this, but like the soundtrack of Ape Escape is like pretty reactive in a cool way.
Interesting.
When you crouch,
I don't think I did.
Okay, did you ever do much crouching to sneak?
No, not as much as I should have.
Okay, no, I got really, in my playthrough on this, I got really into it because I think it was a thing of like, oh, my reactions aren't as good as they used to. But if you sneak up,
sure,
you don't capture the monkey's attention. Again, it's like Metal Gear. But
yeah,
when you go into sneaking, the rest of the soundtrack cuts out except for the percussion. So it's like,
right.
So it's like Wario Land 4, where it's like when he crouches in that, all you can hear is like the sort of simple like drum beat. In this is exactly the same, but because it's jungle music, it's this kind of 160 BPM kind of drum. So it's got this weird thing of like, it's Metal Gear where all the music has gone out and you can only hear the sound of like Snake's heartbeat. But it's this 14-year-old boy who's like hyped up on capturing monkeys through time, so his heartbeat is like running at 200 BPM. And
yeah,
it's just so cleverly done. And like all the music is perfectly like, again, the guy does the Sumo Jungle LP and it's like, oh hey, we have all these levels set in Japanese castles. Oh, perfect. Here's all my offcuts of like using gongs and sumo howls and stuff. You go to the Primordial Age, a lot of like kind of jungle rhythm and stuff like that. You go to the future, way more kind of electronica sound and stuff. But even when you're like in the initial hub section of the game, which I guess we haven't talked about too much. I guess the only thing I would say about that is like, this game is very inspired by Super Mario 64, but it has got a more Mario World style level selection where it's just, okay, here's the next level. There is kind of a hub in there. It's not like Peach's Castle where you learn the control, like you learn the controls in the first level of the game, which is interesting. And then when you learn the new gadgets, they kind of put you in these specialized like obstacle courses, which is cute. But then the hub itself between levels is just this very kind of simple menu, I guess.
Yeah.
Which Terada's soundtrack on that is this very kind of like almost kind of like ambient style. I can't remember what the term is, but it's almost like, you know, kind of chill out like Ibiza jungle stuff, which you just put on the background while you're doing work or whatever. But yeah, everything just sounds so perfect for like throughout this entire game, which again, I wonder when development wise, whether like he was just in the room working with them while they were making the game, that it all just ties up perfect in a way that like Koji Kondo does at Nintendo, and in a way that like a lot of modern game developers, like they'll make the game and then they'll go and find a musician to like make stuff to it afterwards, you know, which you don't end up with anything like massively memorable as a result. But yeah, my big push would be more games need to do jungle music soundtracks, which I think will probably happen relatively soon, because you were saying that you knew the soundtrack before you knew the game. I imagine probably a lot of that was like YouTube, PlayStation jungle music, like playlists and compilations, right?
Well, I was gonna say, like, you know, that is like a point for like making this game again today is like drum and bass and jungle and all that is like, I don't know if this is just cyclical because it's like, you know, we're 20 plus years on, but like it's pretty big again now, and like especially like, you know, Pink Pantheress is like literally making hits that have like a billion views where she's singing over like, you know, drum and bass beats. So, you know, get her in to do the Ape Escape soundtrack, you know, for Pink the remake, for the reboot.
For an Ape Escape soundtrack would be really good. And it is funny, like, as you said, like, drum. I mean, it's funny, in the UK, drum and bass never really went like, it just kind of kept changing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, so we had house music, well, we had we had jungle, and then we had garage, which was kind of like a more stripped back version of it, and then kind of garage intermingled a lot with R&B, and now has since turned into stuff like drill and grime and, you know, bits like that. But no, garage and like jungle music comes back like every 5 years in the, because I think Pink Pantheress is a British artist anyways. So
she is,
some sense. So, but yeah, no, I think the States is ready to embrace jungle again. You've had country music and I don't know what the current popular thing is at the moment, but no, jungle.
I don't either.
Drake could bring jungle back, I reckon.
He would, yeah.
I know he would, because he got really into like grime artists. Like, I can't remember what the name of the album is, but it's the one that has the picture of his dad on the front of it. But yeah, like he put it like a ton of like UK grime artists on it, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm from Canada. That's kind of like the UK. Can I be a grime guy?" It's like, Drake, yeah. And now he's sort of into like, I don't know, kind of crap R&B at the moment. But yeah, I don't know. He could come around to jungle. Jungle, I reckon.
I could see it.
Jungle and garage, I think, could happen with Drake. But
yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what the biggest shame is? They didn't get him back for the other two Ape Escape games.
Damn.
So the soundtrack in those games are like generico, like kind of platformer music. Again, like not to keep hitting the hammer of like, oh, this game is good because like all games now are like super standardized. But I kind of wonder whether like that's why jungle is appealing to a lot of like people who are watching those PlayStation compilation stuff, is like, oh, I didn't know games could sound like this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I don't know, because it's funny, because like whenever you think of like jungle soundtracks and games, it's stuff like, oh, Wipeout, or, you know, racing games, or like FPS. But there was this weird trend of just, yeah, like some platformers had it. Like there's a Bomberman game which has a jungle soundtrack, which I guess makes more sense because that's like a kind of an arcade sort of multiplayer game. You want to get pumped up. But this is like, well, I mean, this is Mario 64, where, you know, that game was full of like different sort of sounds and whatever, because they were like, hey, it's a 3D game, so, you know, it's all these different sounds of the world. And then Sonic Adventure did sort of a similar thing from there. But this is like, no, like, we want this game to like get you pumped up and wanting to chase after apes, so the music's going to reflect that. It's
Have you seen Sakurai's video on like modern game soundtracks?
I haven't. What did he say about them?
It's interesting. I don't know if I I mean, he is a game developer. I don't know if I entirely agree with the conclusion, but it's just about how like there is a trend of games heading in a more ambient direction because of I guess just like the nature of modern games tends to be less busy, like, you know, a lot more focused on realism, and like you don't want I don't know, an overwhelming soundtrack, I guess, to clash with like these modern aesthetics. God, which is, I mean, I guess it does make sense for a lot of games, yeah.
So interesting to think about in regards to Nintendo's two big open world. Like, Nintendo got really, like, at the beginning of the Switch era, they got really into, like, okay, open world versions of our big franchises, let's figure it out. And so you got Mario Odyssey and you got Zelda Breath of the Wild. And they both did exactly the same thing with their soundtracks. Like, Breath of the Wild didn't have any music for the most part until you either went into towns where, okay, I'm focused on doing a thing because I'm here. When you're in battle, okay, I need to get pumped up and doing something. Mario Odyssey was the similar thing of like, unless you were in particular activity zones, the music didn't kick in. It was just like, yeah, ambient. It was just like ambient sounds, which is so odd to kind of think
it's
about. Oh, sorry,
it's interesting because like, yeah, like Breath of the Wild is definitely experimental in its own way, because, you know, that soundtrack is so minimalist, and like, you know, it has all these weird, I don't know, polyrhythms and time signatures and all that, but like but it is a far cry from the busy soundtracks from the 90s and early 2000s, and it's interesting. I don't know, I just thought it was an interesting observation. Like,
no, and it's one of those things that I don't want to say one's inherently better than the other, because everything's going to be a better fit for whatever. I mean, to bring it back to,
like, it makes sense.
To bring it back to the worst game of 2024, Suicide Squad, that game has no music unless you're in, like, missions, basically, and at which point it then kicks in the soundtrack, which, I mean, it works for that game, but it is also kind of like, I mean, if I'm in a... Versus, like, the Spider-Man games, where when you're in the open world, it plays, like, kind of knockoff Sam Raimi style, oh, he's swinging through New York, it's kind of music, but... Yeah, I just always find that the trend nowadays is that people push either towards, like, as Sakurai pointed out, either no or ambient style soundtracks, or it's pure orchestral stuff, which I just find, I don't know. Orchestral music in games reminds me of like people who go, oh, good artists are ones who are really good at like capturing real life, or like, oh, they're the ones that paint like the most epic landscapes or portraits, and it's like, well, no, that's only one like, style of art, but it isn't like a be-all and end-all kind of, like, that sort of level of maximalism just really rubs me the wrong way. But like, when it works, it's fine, you know. Which, all of that to say that I think the soundtrack in Ape Escape is perfect. It's a perfect fit for that game.
It is wonderful.
I think it would be a perfect fit for every other game if you want. And as you said, like, you woke up thinking about the soundtrack. I think of that. It's not in the... No, it isn't the one in the first level. Like, I think of that soundtrack all the... That track from that first level, I think of it all the time. It's just like... Yeah. It is a perfect theme on, like, in regards to, you know, like, Mario's overworld theme, or, like, whatever. Like, Ape Escape should be in that pantheon. And it's a shame that it's not. And again, it just kind of goes back to the thing of... Yeah, I replay this game like every other year, and I think it's like just a perfect video game, like in everything that it's doing. And I don't know, unlike Tetris and Minecraft and whatever are perfect video games, and they still exist. Ape Escape, from all sorts of different aspects, just does not, like, in the modern age. And again, I guess if we went into the later games in the series, I think that would probably, having played them for research, that would illuminate why that's the case. Although, I don't know, even the third one has like a lot of juice to it of, they could have kept this going. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess maybe. I mean, we've covered quite a lot of topics on Ape Escape. Is there anything that we haven't really dug into that much? I mean, the end game, it has an interesting end game, which is you've captured a certain amount of monkeys, and then it tells you, okay, now go and capture the rest of the monkeys. It's like, cool, all right. They give you an end game item which lets you open all the locked doors that you couldn't before, and also makes it way easier to catch monkeys because it's a boxing glove at the end of like an extending telescope kind of thing, like the Nintendo Ultra Hand, so you can just hit monkeys from far away, and it stuns them for seconds at a time. So it's like, oh, cool, I can just go and grab them there. Great.
Yeah.
So yeah, the game just tells you to go for 100%, and you do, and then you have a final boss fight, which is not great. And then it immediately cuts to credits. That's that. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to think. I don't know why. Any other points of Ape Escape that you want to tap on? I guess.
Not really. Really, the only thing we didn't talk about, I guess, is the level design in particular. But I guess it's so. Everything is so straightforwardly brilliant. Like there wasn't I don't know. This game doesn't really have any duds, and as you said, everything is so. The worlds are so fully realized. Like the themes are so. It hits upon like every platformer trope, and I mean that in terms of like. There's the ice level, there's like the lava level and all that, but it also has a bunch of weird stuff. Like there's a level where you go inside like a giant lizard dinosaur, whatever's like mouth, and it's just inside it, which I mean I've seen before certainly, but like I don't know, like it hits upon all the tropes and then some. Like it just every level is so meticulously crafted and memorable, and it doesn't have a lot of the things that annoy me about games from this time. Like I guess there's some precision platforming that can be a little tough.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like it's just a sleek game, start to finish. With yeah.
You know what I'll say about the level design? It kind of splits the difference nicely between Super Mario 64 style big open levels and Ocarina of Time Zelda style. You go into a room, and then you go into the next room, and you get like a new bit of content. Like they have a lot of chunky room-style haunted house content, but then they also have a lot of like big open levels, and they kind of blend those things together really nicely. Which, good on them. The only activity I didn't like that much was when you go to the theme park and you ride the roller coaster, and if you smash into the things too much, you die. That was incredibly annoying because you go too fast. But other than that, it was good. So.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm surprised more platformer games don't have like theme park levels. Rusty Robot on Wheels is a game which is set entirely in a big ass space theme park, but that one isn't very good. Weirdly enough, Tinykin has a level where you go to a kind of a big theme park, and that one's pretty good. But
the one I was thinking of most recently is Psychonauts 2, but that one barely counts. Yeah, like towards the end of the game.
No, I did I beat Psychonauts 2? Yeah, I think I did.
I think that's like the last level, so something like that.
No, I can't.
It's one of.
Yeah, I can't remember it. I remember when you go into your teacher's head and it's a gambling level. I remember a gambling hospital level. I remember.
That's a good one.
I think that's it. No, that was the best level in the game because that's the only one I remember. Oh no, when you go to Woodstock to bring Jack Black back. back to life.
That's a great level.
Spoilers for that, I guess. Oh yeah, there's also the one where you go to the level where it's all the. It's like a lighthouse which is being battled by like rainy conditions, but it's also a barber shop. Like the sea is made out of barbicide and stuff. Yeah, that's it. Ooh, yeah, man, Psychonauts. We should.
Did you watch the documentary?
I need to sit down and watch their Psycho Odyssey.
I was like unemployed or something when I came out, so it was perfect for me. Like, because I just watched that in like a week.
And it was weird as well, because isn't it like 26 parts, and some episodes are 20 minutes long, and like some episodes are like 2 hours long. It's very like yeah. It's
still quite long. It's still like an entire day. Psychonauts 2 is good. We could potentially put it on the list, but that documentary though is like a must watch.
Yeah, both Psychonauts I reckon we could put, because the original Psychonauts has just such an interesting story in regards to it was going to be Microsoft's like their big platformer game, and then they got cold feet, and so Majesco had to publish it eventually. And now, Microsoft and them are buddy. Although we don't know for how much longer before this episode come. As we're recording this episode, they're having a all hands meeting podcast later in the week, which I don't know.
I just saw that. Yeah, so weird.
Although
I
was going to say, it reminds me when you get like an email in work being like, unless you're on a client call tomorrow, you need to be on this call. And it's like,
oh god.
Like, but
I assume that's mostly about the multiplat stuff. That,
I would think
has been
so, but why would you need to have an emergency podcast about that?
Yeah.
Unless it's them doing like a mea culpa kind of, oh, hey, sorry guys, about all the firing that we've done recently, but we want to let you know that, great games are coming, and, we've still got great talent at Microsoft. Or unless it's going to be a thing of, I don't know, like, I don't think they're going to come out and say, oh, we're closing the Xbox division. I think that'd be a bit much. But
yeah.
I
think Double Fine should be okay. I mean, I don't know. They just like, they just went non-profit with Day of the Devs. Like they're doing a lot. So unless they are completely in the dark and they're about to be shut off.
Oh god.
But hopefully not.
No, and
guess we'll see.
I mean, I wonder whether they're gonna have a call about the fact that, oh yeah, sorry, the Activision deal isn't going through or whatever. But that'd be very as well.
Oh yeah, I mean the FTC does want to shut them down again now.
Yeah, because they have a good reason to now. They said, you said that all these jobs were protected. They're not.
Yep.
What the fuck?
Yeah,
weird times for games. It's always been a weird time for games. We're talking about Ape Escape here, a game that, came out at a time where people weren't really, 3D was still relatively new. Nobody really knew what to do with it. And now, apart from like indie games and like games that strive to be 2D, every game is 3D now. And that all had to begin somewhere, and that sort of weirdly began with Ape Escape and Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
So, very good game. Best game that we've covered for the podcast so far. If we do any more episodes, I would be very surprised if any other game comes out that knocks Ape Escape off its perch. I will say one thing that we can have a quick chat about before we wrap up the episode. Wyatt, did you know that this game was remade for the PSP?
I did. I almost played that version because it's also on the PS4. I chose not to just because it looked worse.
Not only does it look worse, it plays absolutely worse as well. This was a weird time for the. Because I want to say this was a PSP launch game, or it was very much in its launch window.
Oh, wow.
Where Sony didn't really know what to do in regards to... Because one of the big selling points of the PSP was, like, this was during the Wii sort of backwards compatibility era, where people were like, hey, you'll be able to play your old games on, new devices. And the big selling point with the PSP was, oh, this can run PS1 games. So, like, it can play the original Crash Bandicoot, or it can play Ridge Racer and stuff like that. And you go, wow, that's impressive. But it only has one control stick on it. So what about stuff like Ape Escape? And he said, don't worry, we have a solution to that. And their solution was they remade Ape Escape with worse graphics and only one control stick. So how the hell does that work? Well, it doesn't really. One control stick and 2 less shoulder buttons. So that was something I mentioned, that it does a thing that I usually find. So jumping in Ape Escape on the PS1 is on the shoulder button, which very rarely do you see that outside of like FPS games where you play like bumper jumper. But no, it works absolutely fine in Ape Escape because it uses. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned that in regards to this being like a weird mix of Mario and Zelda. All the face buttons are how you activate your different. Your different gadgets. So you can bring 4 gadgets into a level. Granted, you can change the gadgets you want at any time. So it's just basically a quick select for your gadgets. So you can have like a net on one, so you always capture monkeys. You can have your propeller on the other, so you can always do big triple jumps. And you can change them out whenever you want. You can press the start button and go to that menu, or you can press quick select and quickly get there as well. Very nicely done. Not so much in Ape Escape on the Loose, where the X bot, so you can only carry 3 items into a level now, and X is now dedicated to jumping. So, bit not as good. When you use the items as well, you can no longer direct where they work. You just tap the button that they're associated with, and he just attacks directly in front of him. So lame. And so you're probably wondering, okay, how do they fix that with the monkeys? They've nerfed the monkeys' intelligence massively. They're incredibly slow to react. They move slower, and if you stun them, they go down for longer as well. So just completely takes any of the dynamic feel out of the game, which is like, God, what a stupid compromise. The loading times are also incredibly slow on it as well. And granted, I know people at home could be saying, but didn't you emulate the PS1 one? Yeah, I also emulated the PSP one, and the loading times in it are absolute dog poop. So would not recommend that. I could see people, if you had only played the PSP one, you would go, I don't see why Ape Escape is such a big deal. This game isn't very good. But that is because it is just a completely butchered port. I would, if you can, emulate the original PS1 version on a portable device which has 2 sticks and all the buttons that you need. Do not, under any circumstances, play the PSP version. It is... I am shocked that they would even consider doing such a thing. And you know what is funny to consider as well? They did the PSP Ape Escape game as a demonstration of, hey, here's our Mario 64 game on a portable device. Nintendo did their own port of Super Mario 64 to the DS, which had similar sort of weird control problems, but then overcompensated by adding like more levels, more characters, more abilities, and like all these extra mini games and stuff. So they had the right idea when it came to, pausing the game to slightly inferior hardware. Weird to think about.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't play it, because again, I was just like, it'd be fun to have a different perspective where I play this PSP one, but I was just like, this just looks significantly worse than the original, and I had no idea about the controls, so
it's
unfortunate.
I mean, they should do like a PS5 remake of it, like not make it. Well, maybe they could make it like hyper realistic graphics, but the apes still look exactly the same as the apes do.
Be awesome.
I mean, the thing I've always said is that they should do like another Ape Escape game, but like where one was about traveling through time, one was the different worlds, and one was television. They should do like an Ape Escape game where they've escaped into like other Sony games, especially like all the new prestige stuff that they should be like you go to The Last of Us, but there's just a bunch of like apes running about. Like one of them's dressed up like Ellie.
That would genuinely be incredible. And it does have kind of the ethos of like Astro's Playroom,
Yeah. Yeah, you could use like you could keep it where, the left stick is for moving, the right stick's for the camera, but you could use the touchpad to do like all the gestural inputs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's $1 million idea. It's $1 billion idea.
I was going to say, if it's $1 million idea, Sony would be like, okay, so that's 15 employees for 1 year. We're not doing
exactly
$1 billion idea though. Now we're talking. Now Sony got dollar signs in their eyes. Did you see the thing of apparently the Spider-Man game or Spider-Man 2 costs like $300 million?
Oh God, yeah.
Like as much as their films, but the games aren't making as much as the films do, which is like not good.
The internal documents were like, how do we keep game costs down? But it was like, how do we keep them down below, like, so that it doesn't go above 300 million? Not like, how do we drop this to 50, 100 million? No, it's like, no. 200 to 300 is where we're going to stay. It just can't go above that. It's absurd.
No, and I was thinking of this in regards to, because I tried running the math, because when, again, not to keep saying it, but with Suicide Squad, I ran the maths of it, of like, how much did this cost to produce? And it looked at probably about 200 mil, all in all.
Right.
The size of that team, how long it was in development, and then taking in, like, QA, marketing, localization costs, like, so that game, like, has to make quite a bit to make it back, versus Mario Wonder, I think, probably costs like a fraction of that, maybe near like 20 mil. And that game has now gone on to sell like over 4-5 million copies. So it was like way more than made like an enormous profit. Same with Metroid Dread. Like, that was made by a team of about, I want to say 100, 200 people. But it was only in development for a few years. And like, you know, they saved costs here and there. And that has now gone on to be like the best-selling Metroid game. And more than made its profit back as a result. More than made up in profit to make back it for its development costs. So.
Yeah. Like, I understand it's not, you know, the entire solution, but it's like, these other developers are showing how to make affordable video games.
I mean, I gotta imagine Sonic Mania was probably the cheapest game, like the best price from development to like how much it made ever, because that game was made by like 10 people or something like that. And I mean, obviously I know it had like localization and marketing and stuff like that, but you know, 2D game made by like an independent team which went on to do like AAA numbers, like that must have been a money printer. So what I'm saying to Sony is get a team of 20 people, give them like, I don't know, 3 years. Maybe get in Soriichi Terada again. I'm sure he's, you know, he'd be happy to do the work for you. And then, make another... Doesn't even have to be hyper-realistic. Could be nice and stylized. That'd be fine. Just make another Ape Escape. That's all we're asking for. That's money printer right there. You could be like, it's a throwback to a classic. The classic Ape Escape game is back. So that's going to be my suggestion for the episode. Wyatt, what about you?
I agree. They need to make... I just remake the original, honestly. Like, you know, it's right there. I mean, I'd rather them do a new one, but I mean, PS5 remake. Simple as that.
Banger. Right. So this game, so once again, I haven't been able to find any US charts for this, so we're going to be doing another British chart, which I will give you as much help as I can, because there are some quote unquote British games on here.
Oh no!
Which, may need some angling. But I will also say as well, so this game came out 18th of June 1999. I would have been 8 years old. I want to say I probably got it around release. I had an N64 as a kid, but I didn't get a lot of use out of it. And then the PS1s just kept dropping in price massively over in the UK. Plus, it became a lot more viable to get one once the modding chips came out, and you could just play hooky copies of PS1 games on burnt CDs. But Ape Escape was a game that I think I remember getting around the time that it came out, because the PS1 that I had did have the DualShock with it. So did play it when it came out. It came out the 18th of June 1999 in the UK when I was 8, as I said. Would have qualified for the charts 2nd of July in the UK, because that's when it came out. Unfortunately, it did not crack the top 10, which is a massive shame.
Damn.
I was looking at, funnily enough, the sales charts at the time. It's not in this top 10, but it is in next week's top 10. This game called Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, which I feel like we should probably put that on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was like Infogrames' attempt at making like a Mario 64 style 3D sandbox kind of collectathon. But they had the Looney Tunes license. weirdly good and interesting game. I would go to.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, I think you would. I think you'd get a kick out of Bugs Bunny Lost in Time. I reckon.
Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with it. I don't know much about it.
But either way, there's 10 games to guess. Like I said, I will help you out with some of these, which I don't think you'll get. The first one, though, not so much, because I think this one you might be able to get. It is a PlayStation game. It is a franchise that was pretty big on the PS1, had a notorious entry on the PS3, and then just kind of on the PS2, and then just kind of disappeared in the 360 era. It is a driving game, but it's not a racing game.
Oh, okay.
Feel free to ask questions if you want any further clarification, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Okay, and it's a Sony exclusive?
I believe it was also on the PC. It's not published. Okay. It's published by GC Interactive, which no longer exists, but they were a big old publisher back in the day. Also developed internally by GC, but now the developers are better known as Reflections.
Okay, that sounds so familiar. God, I have no idea. It's not Driver, obviously.
It is Driver.
Oh, it is Driver. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know it started on the PS1, actually.
Oh, yeah. No, this was like this is the funny thing, because people always go, oh, GTA 3 was like the first proper 3D kind of game like this. No, actually, Driver 1 and 2 sort of laid a lot of the path for this, which is why I gave the clue of it had a notorious PS2 game, because Driver 3 was meant to be their answer to GTA 3, and then...
Is it just called Driver? The first one?
Yeah, it's just called Driver.
Wow, okay, I do not know this one, I guess. That's funny.
I think they originally wanted to call it The Driver, but like after a Steve McQueen film, but they were like, you can't clear that. You can just clear Driver, though, if that's fine. So... Anyways, number 2 on the list. I don't think you'll get this franchise, so what I will say is, if you can guess the sport it is, you can have it. But this is also a PlayStation game. This is also a driving game, but this one is actually a racing game. And it's based on a racing sport that's very popular in the UK, which is why it's on the charts. I don't know how big it is in the US, but most associated with off-roading, I would say.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not BMX.
It's not BMX, no. This is cars. I would not it's not quads or bikes or anything like this. This is very much cars.
Okay. Is it a rally game?
It is. It is V-Rally 2 for the PlayStation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never heard of that.
No, this was, I want to say it was Infogrames produced these, but yeah, the V-Rally games massively over in the UK. I mean, Rally Sport was just humongous in the UK, was the thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay.
We got a lot of muddy backwoods that you could just drive through, and Colin McRae was like the sort of star of that. But you still kind of get rally games now and again, but not as much. Now, would you believe me if I tell you that number 3 in the list is also a driving game? Because it is.
Oh my god.
This is also a PlayStation game, but it is not a rally game. It is more of a standard racing game, I would say.
Gran Turismo.
It is Gran Turismo. Yeah, there we go. You're on fire at the moment. Is
it the first one?
Yeah, it is the first Gran Turismo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
GT1 for the PlayStation.
Okay.
Now, fortunately, number 4 isn't a racing game. It's something different. It's a sports simulation game.
Okay. Who developed it?
Good question. I forgot to make a note of that.
Okay, but what, you said it was PlayStation?
Yeah, so it is on the PlayStation. I would say that this is a franchise which is bigger on the PC, though.
Football Manager? Or football?
I will give you that. It is FA Manager, which was
okay.
Which was kind of a spin-off of Football Manager. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can have that. It's FA Manager for the PlayStation. Now, number 5.
Yeah, that's weird. I can't imagine it on a console.
I mean, it's a lot of menuing, which I can imagine you just use the D-pad to kind of just
yeah.
through menus.
Just seems annoying, but
yeah, like it's going to be quicker using a mouse. So, question number 5 then, which might be a franchise, very excitingly, it's a PC game. First off, it's an FPS game, if you can believe that. It came out in 1999, and it's an FPS franchise which is based on 2 films.
2. Okay. When you say 2 films,
yes.
You mean okay.
2 separate franchises together at last.
Oh, is it Alien versus Predator?
It is Aliens versus Predator for the PC. Yeah,
Okay.
A game which I want to cover on Bullet Time at some point because it has a really weird development history in regards to all the Aliens versus Predator games have been made by exactly the same developer all the way through. But one came out in 1994 for the Jaguar, which was like kind of their competition with Doom. Then one came out in 1999, which was them competing with like Quake and Half-Life. And then another one came out in 2010, which was them competing with the likes of like Call of Duty and Halo.
Yeah.
So it's like seeing the same idea like repeated 3 different times through like FPS history at like different levels of quality. Well, like sort of like whatever. Just like a weird reflection of like what were FPS tropes at the time, I suppose. So.
Yeah. Also, like, wait, does that mean it predated the movie? Like the movie Alien vs. Predator?
So Alien vs. Predator was a thing in the comics before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like a really... So basically Alien... I want to say around the time that Alien 3 came out or whatever, or it might have been Predator 2. Like, it was like a Freddy versus Jason thing. Like, people were like, oh, Alien's got to fight Predator. It'd be so epic.
Right.
And Dark Horse Comics had, like, the rights to both franchises in comics and said, yeah, let's pair them together.
Okay.
And so it just became, like, this sort of, like, amongst kind of, like, fanboy sort of culture. Like, it just became this huge thing of, yeah, Alien versus Predator. Let's make it happen. Mm-hmm. And because Rebellion did a lot of comics adaptation stuff into games, they just managed to land on making a game about it. And again, they were like right on the prefaces of first-person shooters becoming a thing after Wolfenstein 3D and did their own version of it, which was like much like we were talking about Mario 64 being what sold the N64 and like Ape Escape selling the DualShock. Their Alien vs Predator game was meant to sell the Atari Jaguar, and I think it did a bit. Yeah. Not a looker of a game is all I'll say. It's very slow and chunky compared to Doom at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah. Something to dig into. Speaking of which, number 6 is another PC game. I don't know whether you know this franchise. It was relatively big back in the day.
Okay.
Massive in the UK. Mostly because of its developer. It was developed by Bullfrog, who you would know more for Theme Park, Theme Hospital, but more importantly, being the first studio that Peter Molyneux founded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is one of their games, and it's very much a simulation-style game in relation to that.
Okay, so Roller Coaster Tycoon.
It's not Roller Coaster Tycoon, no.
Okay. Wow, okay. I thought I was going to be 6 for 6. It is them though, like that they made Roller Coaster Tycoon, yeah?
No, so Roller Coaster they made Theme Park. Roller Coaster Tycoon was made by by a Scottish guy called Chris Sawyer.
I see. I know I've heard of Bullfrog. What genre is it again then?
It's like a kind of a simulation building sort of genre, much like Theme Park is. But...
Okay, still a simulation. Is this a Peter Molyneux game?
Oh, yeah.
Black and White 2?
It's not Black and White nor Black and White 2. This predates both of those games.
Oh, God. I'm sure I know it, and I just can't think of the name. Shoot.
I can give you some clues.
Sure.
Let's just say the game is it's a bit twisted and edgy.
Is it... Oh, no, I don't remember this, Peter Molyneux. Is it Dungeon Keeper?
It is
Dungeon Keeper 2?
It is Dungeon Keeper 2.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
Yeah,
Got
classic Peter Molyneux game here. Like, the first Dungeon Keeper, they literally made it as like, oh, what if we made Evil Theme Park? And that's what they did. So,
Interesting.
And it did so well that they made a second one, which its big selling point was that it was fully 3D. You could rotate around and like zoom in on stuff. Pretty okay game, I would say. I'll tell you what game is also pretty okay. Number 7 in the list for the PC and the N64, a console that we haven't seen in this list yet. Another racing game, but this one is based on one of the biggest films to come out in 1999.
Huh. Okay. I have no idea. Based on a film that came out in 1999.
I'll give you some clues about the film. It was a return of a franchise that that originally came out in 1977. The last one in this franchise came out in 86 or 85, I think. This was a long time coming.
Okay. I was I was thinking like, my head was in like Bloodborne kart. Like, okay, is this like Terminator in like a go-kart or something like that? Okay, but now this is I don't know, it's the Star Wars pod racing game, the Phantom Menace, right?
Yeah, I'll give it to... It's Star Wars Episode 1 : Race.
Right. Yeah, okay. That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah,
it's the pod racing game, right? Okay,
yeah. It is. Yeah, it's all about the pod racing scene from that. The N64 version has this really interesting thing as well, which is you can play it with 2 N64 controllers plugged in, where you control the power to the different engines by using the different control sticks.
Okay, that rocks.
Yeah, it's very... So, like, they basically wanted to recreate the feeling of, like, you being, like, Anakin Skywalker, where you have these, like, chariot-style wires coming off you, and you have your hands, like, around these 2 different, like, kind of power paddles, essentially.
That works with the N64 controller, because it looks like a piece of alien technology.
Exactly. It came from another world to give us 3D games. And then Sony said, no, we'll make it look more like the SNES controller. And they did. And that's why that's the most popular controller everybody uses now.
Yep.
Speaking of the PlayStation, by the way, at number 8 is a PlayStation game. One of the biggest franchises associated with the original PS1. A franchise that's no longer around today, unfortunately, but was basically getting new entries up until 2015.
Metal Gear Solid?
It is Metal Gear Solid for the PS1. Well, you are on... Are the clues too easy? Are you just too clued in on the game?
I think just 1999 is just an easy year for some reason.
I guess so, yeah. And these are like... I don't know. I mean, let's put that to the test. Number 9 in the charts. Another PlayStation game. Another big franchise associated with PlayStation.
Okay. Well, now I don't have anything up my sleeve.
Okay. This is I will say, this is... I don't know how I would describe the genre of this game. I mean, it's kind of a platformer, but not really. It's kind of an adventure game, but not really. It's third person. I guess that's the main thing about it, is that it's a third person game.
Well, it's not Jak and Daxter. This is before Jak and Daxter.
No, but Jak and Daxter was on the PS2.
Yeah, that was PS2. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like, I'm trying to... Kind of a platformer. Big Sony game. Is it Crash Bandicoot? Well, no, you would...
No, it's not.
That would be more obviously a platformer.
Yeah, if it was Crash, I would have said that was a pure platformer. This is...
Yeah. Huh.
I mean, I could call this an adventure game, but that's sort of like... Any game's kind of an adventure game.
Is it Tomb Raider?
It is, but which one?
1999. I don't... 3? 2.
At number 9, it is Tomb Raider 3 for the PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Okay.
It's a good
Got
job.
it.
I was going to get the clue of that it had a big, like, kind of foothold in Britain. Because it kind of did. Lara Croft is a British icon, I would argue.
Okay.
Like King Charles and stuff like that. Which would help you with number 10, because this is the most British game going. This is another PlayStation game, and this is a sports game.
Oh. FIFA.
It's not FIFA, no.
Oh, no.
The second most British sport you could potentially think of.
What? The second most British sport? Well, I guess this is the UK chart, so that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think this is a British sport, but cricket? Is there a cricket game?
So at number 10 of the charts is Brian Lara Cricket for the PlayStation.
Oh, okay.
Cricket is like one of the most British sports. We exported it to the colonies. That's why everybody else... That's just why the States don't play cricket, because they don't like it. Whereas in India and Australia, cricket is gigantic.
That's the thing. I weirdly... I know it's big in Britain, but I think of it mostly as an Australian sport for some reason.
That's fair enough. I mean, I know... Well, that's where a lot of the big events take place, is like you would Australian... Oh no, is the Australian Open for golf? I can't remember. But yeah, humongous.
No idea.
The likes of like India and stuff like that as well. But,
right.
Oh, that was a smooth quiz, Wyatt. Good job.
Thank you.
You did better in the quiz than I did when we did the Princess Peach quiz.
That was a tough one, and to be fair, I think I did pretty poor at the first one. So there is that.
I think you did all right, but no, you've been studying your games. You knew that this came out in '99, and you're like, oh yeah, I've got this nailed down. So, well, you know what? Because you had this so nailed down, I'll let you wrap up the episode by telling people, hey, Wyatt, where can people follow you online, and anything you want to promote, I guess.
I am on YouTube at Wyatt Joseph, where I make video essays. And you can't really find me anywhere else. I am on Blue Sky. That's about it.
Hey, well, Blue Sky is open to everybody now. So
that's true. Yeah, check me out on Blue Sky. I don't know my handle, though.
I know it's probably massive. Is .bluesky.social or whatever.
Right.
You Wyatt Joseph on there, I guess.
I need to open up my Blue Sky. I don't know. It's probably the same thing. It is at wyattjoseph.bsky.social. That is my handle. Look
for Wyatt Joseph on Blue Sky. Hey, I'm also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at Hot Side. I don't post barely.
Me neither.
I'll probably start doing so the more people start using it.
Yeah.
What they need to do is invent a plugin where it's like, okay, if I send a tweet from Twitter, it should also go to Blue Sky.
It really should. They should do that.
They should invent like a tweet deck where it has both Twitter and Blue Sky in it. As I said, I'm also on Twitter at Hot Cider as well, and you can follow me on YouTube as well at Hot Cider. I guess then, another successful episode of Coyote Time. Absolutely no technical issues that happened in the background of this. This was a smooth experience all the way through. And we'll look forward to telling you more about platform games in the next episode. Goodbye for now. This podcast has been made possible by Dylan Robinson, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Jesse Garasha, Kevin from Pixellet, Mouse, Twyla27, Valerie B, VG, and the Hot Cider support tier. If you'd like to help with the production of episodes and gain access to extra content, consider supporting over at patreon.com/Hot Cider. That's HOTCYDER. A special thanks to Max Coburn for the Bullet Time theme tune.